Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, the online world of Appalachian memes and what they tell us about folks who live here.
I always say that these characters are an archetype and they're an amalgamation of multiple people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be funny because it wouldn't be relatable. And I think they take off because they're lovable people.
Parts of West Virginia have been radio silent since the 1950s for scientists to monitor the skies. So what does that mean for first responders in an emergency?
Now all we're hearing about is how important the mission at Sugar Grove is and how important the mission at Greenbank is. No one wants to talk about the daily mission of saving lives out here in these communities.
And winter holidays are here. We've got some tips to keep the festivities from going up in smoke.
When frying anything, water and frying don't get along.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Humor runs deep here in Appalachia. Even online, where memes about mountain life seem to go viral all the time. Folkways reporter Madeline Miller brings us this story about two artists who've taken holler humor to the digital realm.
Scrolling through Andy Marie Tillman's TikTok is like hanging out at a family reunion. Her sketches feature all kinds of characters, like Papaw, who's always piddling in the garage and telling silly jokes.
I want you to look here at this new pup. They done learned this thing how to play hide and go seek. Name it Dog, I guess. I mean, I ain't got time to go naming everything I got. Come on.
There's Aunt Pam, who Andy Marie describes as the black hole purse lady. She's the one who passes out snacks from her bag at church.
That's good singing. Here. She's wanting gum too. Here, pass it down. Nope, you don't need a whole piece. God won't be able to hear you with all that gum in your mouth.
And then there's the character who Andy Marie calls her heavily medicated aunt, who's usually trying to make you a casserole.
How's your mom doing? She's not doing good, is she, hon? I hate to hear that, but I could make y'all a casserole. You know, your mom used to love my chili. But I don't make that.
Andy Marie is a content creator and humorist from Eastern Tennessee who currently lives in Nashville. She's a self-described silly person who's dabbled in just about every area of the performing arts, including music. She started doing these impressions on stage in between her songs. At first, when people told her she should be a comedian, she was sad that they weren't as moved by her music. But then she realized that they might be onto something.
People have always told me that I need to put some of my characters online, and I didn't even know about TikTok. And I really just did it for funsies one day. And then my Papaw character really took off.
Over the years, Andy Marie has gained quite the social media following, with almost 500,000 followers across all her platforms. Characters like Papaw and Aunt Pam are fan favorites for a reason.
I always say that these characters are an archetype and they're an amalgamation of multiple people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be funny because it wouldn't be relatable. And I think they take off because they're lovable people.
With such a large following, it's clear her characters are relatable, especially when they remind fans of their own loved ones. In fact, some of Andy Marie's sketches have even helped people through difficult times in life.
When people tell me that it helped them through like bereavement period after someone died, that's when it feels real. Because a lot of times it doesn't feel real and I don't know that I'm doing anything because I'm being so silly. You know, I'm like, this can't possibly be, this is dumb. This can't possibly be worth anything. But when somebody tells me it helped them through grief, that's when it feels real.
Andy Marie isn't the only one portraying life in Appalachia in the digital realm. So is another creator who goes by the name Little Bubby Child. Under the alias of Bubby Wade, they create cartoon vignettes of people you might run into in eastern Kentucky where they live. With their chicken scratch art style and use of local dialect, Little Bubby Child's memes bring rural Kentucky to life. Typically, the memes don't include sound, but on occasion they voice a meme, like in this one, where Bubby Wade tells his dad about a kid he met at school.
Hey, Dad, guess what? What? There's a boy in my class called Michael. Said his parents named him after Michael Jordan because he could jump so high. That's plumb wild, ain't it? Well, what'd they do, just call him baby till he's old enough to jump? He lied to me.
Bubby's real identity is a secret, and while I wasn't able to speak with the person behind the memes, I was able to speak with Dr. Sarah Craycraft. Sarah's a lecturer of folklore and mythology at Harvard University and a big Little Bubby Child fan. Sarah's from Appalachian, Ohio, and she came across Little Bubby Child when her sister sent her the memes.
I think, if you're in Appalachian circles, it's inevitable to come across Little Bubby Child.
Inevitable because Little Bubby Child is very popular, with nearly 500,000 Instagram followers. The memes reference all kinds of things that resonate with fans, from potted meats and Marilyn Manson to Beanie Babies and dollar stores.
Some gal uptown asked me what's the difference between Family Dollar and the Dollar Tree. I said, "Law, honey, if you don't already know, I sure can't explain it to you."
Sarah says that what she likes so much about Little Bubby Child is that the memes reflect a version of her childhood and family stories that feels genuine.
It felt like a genuine sense of home and a celebration of making do and just the silly people in our hometowns that we know and love, but that aren't seen maybe or talked about or celebrated or recognized in ways that are kind and caring. So instead of being tropes, it just becomes this is a social world that you're a part of and that's familiar to you.
Sarah recently lectured on Little Bubby Child in one of her classes at Harvard as a way to talk about the importance of dialect. She says that it wasn't just the students from Appalachia who resonated with Little Bubby Child. Those with ties to rural places outside of Appalachia also felt a connection to the memes.
It was an interesting kind of realization for us that what we think of as Appalachia maybe is a rural experience. What we think of as very local is maybe not as local as it seems. Maybe the picture of mainstream America should shift to reflect this a little bit more than other kinds of Americanness or ways of being American.
There was one Little Bubby Child character in particular that sparked a lot of conversation about what it means to be Appalachian, the Goth Brother.
We named our black metal band the Awfulest Mess Ever Was, because that's what my papa calls everything I like.
The Goth Brother is Bubby's older and more alternative brother. His spiky black hair and face piercings perfectly complement Bubby's red mullet. The Goth Brother loves online fantasy games and his son, Goro.
So in some ways it was like affirming of tropes or stereotypes or things that people might associate with the region, but in other ways it was like blowing open some of the ideas of who lives in Appalachia.
In her class, Sarah and her students discussed how to classify Bubby's content. She explained that Bubby's jokes fit into a lineage of Appalachian humor.
I do think there is a lovely, rich culture of humor in Appalachia, and a lot of it is just clever, insightful observations of everyday life. It is people making humor out of the stories all around them.
Bubby's memes do sound like jokes that you'd hear just out and about in Appalachia or talking with your friends and family. That's one of the reasons that people in the region send them to those who aren't in the area anymore.
Sometimes the humor can also open up and connect the diaspora, people who have relationships to the region, people who have had to leave and miss home. And I think, the big part of why Little Bubby Child and Andy Marie Tillman's content resonates is that it reaches beyond the small community. It lets people connect outside of regional boundaries.
And that's why there's such a great way to remember your loved ones and let them know that you're thinking of them.
I love you, and I miss you, and I'm thinking about you every day and night.
I love you too, Mama.
I love you, honey. I really do.
Well, I appreciate that.
Every day and night. Every day and night.
For Inside Appalachia, I'm Madeline Miller.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. Since the 1950s, the federal government has designated parts of 2 West Virginia counties as a national radio quiet zone. Research facilities in that zone are protected from radio interference, so TV, radio, and cell signals are restricted. Now, 10 Virginia and West Virginia counties are asking the government to change these restrictions to ensure 911 calls get to emergency responders. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd reports.
Pendleton County's Emergency Services Coordinator Rick Gillespie has spearheaded the campaign. He says volunteer fire and emergency responders in the quiet zones often miss calls from 911 dispatchers.
There are times that the call goes out that one or more of those individuals that could respond to that call do not receive it.
One of the reasons this area was originally selected as a quiet zone is because the geography of the mountains blocks radio frequencies from traveling in. In 1958, way before smartphones, the Federal Communications Commission designated the area as a radio quiet zone, which put further limitations on technologies. 2 research facilities operate inside the quiet zone. One in Pendleton County is used by the National Security Agency. A second facility, the Greenbank Observatory in Pocahontas County, has the largest radio telescope on the planet. There, astronomers use radio signals to study deep space and listen for signals far beyond our solar system. In other words, Mulder and Scully could have set up an X-Files bureau inside these remote mountains. But with technological advances, including satellite internet, some, like Gillespie, want fewer restrictions inside the quiet zone. In recent years, he's met with Greenbank scientists to talk about these challenges, and each side says they're willing to work together. But Gillespie says he's frustrated by how slowly the process is going. He also feels shut out by a recent announcement between Greenbank and Starlink, a satellite communication company operated by SpaceX.
We utilize Starlink for emergency communications. The public uses it. We have all used it for the last 2 years, and now it's been turned off.
Actually, Starlink has not been turned off. The new agreement provides residential satellite internet service to 99.5% of people inside the quiet zone. Chris Dupree is a Greenbank astronomer.
This new arrangement does nothing to reduce coverage for roaming and mobile units that were operational before. All of that remains the same. The big change that has happened is that fixed residential service is now available for many, many more residents of the quiet zone.
There are some technical details that might explain why, as Gillespie says, some people who used to be able to get Starlink's roaming service are now no longer able to. Dupree explains there are several spaces around the facilities where signals aren't technically supposed to get in, but occasionally they do, which has interfered with their research. Under the new agreement, Greenbank and Sugar Grove actually tell Starlink when they're doing research, and Starlink aims their satellites away from the facilities during these times. Gillespie says this creates a problem. What if an emergency occurs during those times when the satellites are facing away?
Right now, all we're hearing about is how important the mission at Sugar Grove is and how important the mission at Greenbank is. No one wants to talk about the daily mission of saving lives out here in these communities.
Greenbank is currently working on a study to find solutions to some of these problems, says Dupree.
There are technical solutions to these problems, right? And so I think that we have to work together.
Gillespie says for any solution to work, his community will need financial assistance to pay for new technologies. He adds that it would also be nice if Starlink would agree to speak with them. So far, he says, the company hasn't agreed to have a meeting to talk through their concerns. 9 West Virginia counties and Augusta County in Virginia have signed resolutions asking for help to allow more people inside the quiet zone to better communicate with emergency dispatchers. I'm Roxy Todd.
Later in the show, a history of gingerbread that has nothing to do with houses or the holidays. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.
Distinguished poet, educator, and longtime Virginia resident Nikki Giovanni died last Monday at the age of 81. Giovanni was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and lived much of her life in Blacksburg, Virginia, where she taught creative writing at Virginia Tech. One of the most well-known and acclaimed poets in America, Giovanni was a voice for African Americans and for Appalachians. She was extensively published, authoring dozens of books and recording several albums. In 2022, Radio IQ's Roxy Todd spoke with Giovanni as she was retiring from teaching.
One of the first things I say to my class when I was teaching is that if you want to be a poet, you must know one thing. Nobody will know who you are until after you're dead. And they all go, no, Nikki. No, we don't do art to be known. We do art for the art.
What else would you tell young people who aspire to be a poet?
That you should enjoy it, that you should enjoy your work, you should enjoy what you have to share, that life is a good idea, and as you look at things, all of that works. But don't think that because you can write a great poem, and maybe you can, this is not something I know, that you're going to be a millionaire. You don't start this career, this is a life, and you do it because you're proud of it and because you can do something. Many people, many people became writers, and what they were doing was washing dishes as they were writing. This is not your job. It's who you are, and you do what it is to keep your art alive.
Giovanni grew up in Ohio, but spent many of her summers with her grandparents in Knoxville, Tennessee, the city where she was also born. When she was just 16 years old, she enrolled as a freshman at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. She credits her grandparents for her love of learning.
My grandmother probably had my biggest influence. And my grandfather, and I'm always remembering, I'm always speaking of grandmother, but Grandpapa was quite a brilliant man. He was a Latin scholar. And his job, he taught in high school in the days when you taught Latin, which you almost don't teach anymore, which means that youngsters today don't know the foundations of words. And one of the reasons that I love libraries is that if you were interested in something, you had a card catalog. And as you went through the card catalog, you found other things that interested you. And so your world expanded. Just standing at the card catalog expanded your world. And, of course, kids know nothing about a card catalog. And pretty soon they won't know anything about books because everybody keeps taking books away. And there's just something nice about holding a book. There really is. I mean, that's what rainy days are for. There's no such thing as writer's block. There's such a thing as you don't know what you're talking about. You have to read something because there's always something that you haven't thought about. There's always something that you can take in. You have to write because eventually it'll come together in a way that makes sense to you, or that you, and then you've got your poem, or you've got your play, you've got what you need. But you have to read every day.
What are you looking forward to the most about retirement?
Well, I'm going to get caught up on a lot of my reading. I'm behind. And to say that, I just have some books that I just hadn't. I am in the process of rereading. Don't laugh, but Winnie the Pooh, and when he goes when Christopher Robin has to leave Pooh Bear, and Pooh Bear says, "Well, I'll always be here." This always touches me. So I am in probably about the middle of rereading Winnie the Pooh, and I say that too. And I know I'm black, but I know that you just can't always only read who you are. And I would say the same thing to those of us who are white, or those of us who are not who American, who are Latinos. You have to deal with other people. And I'm a jazz fan, so of course I really like Brazilian music is really great. It came from us. It came from the spirituals being built on jazz was built on that, but it's traveled over. And it just opens up a whole nother thing. But Winnie the Pooh right now is what I'm reading, but I've got the entire Winnie the Pooh, so I can't carry it around. It's too heavy to carry around. And I read my good friend and my student, who I'm so proud of, Kwame Alexander. I read when his books come out. And he just got he just released a new book, The Door of No Return. And there's another young lady, and I really like what she's doing, and she's a big girl. And we haven't had many books from big girls. and because everybody is thin. But her name is Renee Watson, and so she's been writing things from that point of view, and it's just cheerful. I mean, she's not like, oh, I'm fat and nobody loves me. She's just like, she has a girlfriend in her last book, and she says, her girlfriend says, well, let's go shopping, and she finally got tired of it, and she says, why is it that we never shop in the XX stores? Why do we always shop in your store? I thought, yeah, tell them, because there are big girls who feel like they don't have friends because they don't fit, because nobody wants to go into. And I'm really proud of Renee, because again, she's not backing away from her body. She's saying, no, this is who I am, and I'm having characters who are now talking about it. I just love what she's doing.
What do you think the poet's role is in society?
I really think the poet's role is truth. I just think you can't get around it. And T.S. Eliot, and it's really easy to dislike Mr. Eliot because he was a conservative. I won't use the word that should be used. But Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a great poem. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is stretched out against the sky like a patient at the rise upon the table. Oh, do not say that you're not able. I mean, that's just wonderful. What he's going to do is take us through World War II, which we need to be going through. And no mother or father who's never read a book in their lives need to be saying, well, I don't think that should be in the library. You never even read T.S. Eliot. And, of course, I think it's probably a good case to say that T.S. may have been a Nazi. I'm not really sure. And I'm not interested, because what I want is not his life, but his work. And so we have to find a way to separate the foolishness, and some writers, and I do not count myself among them, are alcoholics, some are drug addicts, some only wrote one book. I mean, you just do what's important and what makes you happy. And I think what makes you happy is truth. So I think the main thing that you have to say for yourself is, I'm going to tell the truth, and whoever doesn't like it, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
Anything else to add that I didn't ask?
I'm a good cook.
You talked about food. Can you tell me about your very favorite, your favorite food that you remember that you still cook today?
Oh, my. Well, see, my grandmother was a great cook. And, of course, I fry her chicken. But I also, if I may, I was talking about pig feet earlier. I really roast. Some people do pig feet, they boil them and stuff, but I roast my pig feet. And I must say, I'm excellent at that.
What's the secret?
Probably olive oil, but garlic, olive oil, and whatever I have. I grow some tarragon, and I grow some basil. So Southern cooks, and that's what I love about Southern cooks, of which I am one, we cook whatever is in the pantry. So we don't worry about, how the French cooks and the really important chefs, all, 1/4 of an inch of this and one, but we don't cook like that. We just open the pantry door and say, what's in there? And let's find a way to cook. But I love, I've been thinking about that. I've invited a couple of my friends from Chicago, one of whom has never had pig feet. And this is slaughter season is coming up, as if you know. And so pretty soon you'll be able to find pig feet in Kroger's. And I've invited him and his wife down. And I said, I'm going to roast you. I'm going to show you what pig feet are. And it depends on, fresh herb. Any fresh herb is going to be good. But, I think that God probably got sick of us for a lot of reasons, and we deserve it. But he said, but I'm going to give you garlic to just show that I have not given up on you. So, that's the truth. I love garlic.
What do you hope to be your legacy?
Well, I think, you mean on my grave, on my tombstone, I think that they'll say she always told the truth. And I've not been afraid of truth. And I've not been afraid to say it.
The holidays bring people together to celebrate, which, when paired with cold winter weather, can create the potential for fires, whether that's from stringing lights up on the tree or frying a turkey. Mark Lambert is director of the West Virginia University Fire Service Extension. He spoke with WVPB's Chris Schultz about fire safety.
Let's start with the big one that catches people's attention. Can you talk to me a little bit about safety around turkey preparation? And I'm thinking specifically about deep frying a turkey.
When frying anything, water and frying don't get along. A lot of times these turkeys that have these massive explosions are frozen or still partially frozen, and that means there's extra water in there. And water violently reacts with oil or grease, especially if you use an open flame to heat that oil. Then that oil becomes fuel for a fire. If you use a little common sense, it's a great way to fix a turkey. You keep water away from it. You realize you're dealing with boiling oil. Keep small kids, keep pets away from wherever you're doing it outside. You want to have proper ventilation. If you're using a gas-fired burner to heat the oil, I should also say make sure if you have a kitchen fire extinguisher, it should meet the requirement for grease fires. You don't want a water-based fire extinguisher for a kitchen. You want to make sure that whatever kind of fire extinguisher you get, it is that it has on the box or label, you can use it for grease fires. The other thing nowadays, they have these what they're called fire towels that you can hang in your kitchen or somewhere around. And basically, if you have a grease fire, you throw that on it. It has chemicals in the towel to help put out the fire.
What are some just general tips that people should keep in mind when it comes to fire safety and best practices around not just Thanksgiving, but the holidays in general?
As far as the kitchen, you're right. The oven's on. There may be a lot of people in there moving around. If you forget that the oven's on, then obviously you could burn something. The same with pots on the stove. You want to keep, again, small children and animals away from the stove. Turn the pot handles towards the back of the stove because you don't want them knocking something over and getting hurt. You don't want to spend your holiday in a burn center.
Let's move on to Christmas real quick. What are some things that people need to keep in mind as they're putting up their holiday decorations around this time of year to look out for and to ensure, again, that they're not putting themselves in a bad position when they switch on those Christmas lights?
Make sure that lights or other products you buy are UL listed. Underwriters Laboratory will be a big U and an L on there. That way they at least meet a safety standard for the U.S. If you have older lights, you're unstringing them, you're putting them up, and you've got lights going bad or you've got sparks or electrical issues, you just throw those lights away. Don't try to replace the bulbs. Lights are cheaper nowadays. You're better off just to get rid of them than try to use them on a tree or in other areas like that. You want to also, with all of your Christmas arrangements, especially with candles, but even with electric lights, you don't want things dangling. You don't want things that kids or pets can grab and pull off onto them or pull off into the floor. Again, candles should never be unattended. Incense burners should never be unattended. Radiant space heaters should never be unattended. And with regard to a tree, if you're going to get a live tree, you want to make sure you water it daily. You want to make sure you keep a check on that water. The leaves are not falling. I mean, you can go on YouTube and see some horrible videos of trees that dried out and caught on fire. And just a few common sense items can keep Christmas memorable in a good way and not a bad way.
It's getting to be that temperature when people want their furnace to be on. Here in West Virginia, we still have a lot of wood burning apparatuses. What are some things that folks can do to ensure that their system is in good working order and not going to be a hazard?
Get your system inspected. If I had a fireplace, I would have it inspected yearly. You don't want creosote built up on the inside that can cause a fire in the chimney, or you don't want some kind of issue with a blockage that puts carbon monoxide into the house. With a furnace, you want to get it checked, if not every year, every 3 years. Besides smoke detectors, you want to have carbon monoxide detectors on every floor in your house if you have a fuel-fired heating or cooking source. So that's the main things. And again, with the radiant space heaters, if you're going to use them to heat up an area in the house, especially when it gets really cold, this happens, never leave them unattended. Never leave them and go to bed at night. Definitely you don't want to leave them with small kids or animals around. And if you have a radiant space heater you use, my recommendation would be if it's more than 5 to 10 years old to get rid of it and get a newer one. There are a lot of nice features on newer radiant space heaters that try to combat some of these issues that we have with the older ones. I would still never leave one alone, and I would never go to sleep with one.
So, Mark, is there anything else that I have given you a chance to discuss regarding fire safety around the holidays and as temperatures are getting colder?
It's just like I said, a lot of it's just common sense and thinking about what you're doing before you do it. Everybody wants to have fun at holidays and hang out with family and friends, but do it in a safe manner.
You know, while we're talking about people having fun, maybe people want to break from the family, go outside, light a fire. They shouldn't be doing that this time of year.
No, this year especially. I know we've had some rain, so everybody thinks, well, we've had a little bit of rain, everything's back to normal. That's not the way it is. We're still under drought conditions. As I've said before, the forestry workers do a great job. We don't need to give them any more work than they already have. So I would not be burning outside at all right now.
That was WVU Fire Service Extension Director Mark Lambert speaking with reporter Chris Schultz. For a longer version of this interview, visit our website, wvpublic.org. Every November, colleges and universities recognize students who are from the first generation in their family to go to college. At Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, more than half of the student population is registered as first-gen students. WVPB's Randy Yohe has more.
Talking in Marshall's busy Memorial Students Center, sophomore Jamie Wheeler was ready and willing to comment on her first-generation college experience. The Matewan, West Virginia native says as a freshman, it would have been a different story.
If you had came to me my first semester here and asked to do an interview, I would have absolutely ran away. I was terrified of speaking to new people. Neither of my parents finished high school, but they always had very big dreams for me.
Wheeler says those dreams came with plenty of first-gen student challenges.
I wasn't sure how to go about a lot of things. There were just a lot of new experiences and opportunities, and I was really overwhelmed. But I'm a part of a few different organizations that help financially. That was a big issue for me.
Bonnie Bailey is Marshall's Director of Student Support Services. She says up to 2/3 of Marshall's 12,000 students identify as first-gen, which means coming from a family where neither parent completed a 4-year college degree.
I think for the region that we live in, a lot of Appalachia, and I think West Virginia only has, it's either 23 to 27% of West Virginia residents have a 4-year degree.
Bailey says most first-gen students are academically bright and receive scholarships, but many come from challenging situations.
They are carrying a heavier load besides just coming to school. They may be one of the primary caregivers of their family, whether they're non-traditional student or not. We have a lot of students who grew up in foster care, or they are taking care of their grandparents, that kind of thing. So not only do they have to navigate first-gen college issues, they're navigating a heavy load in life as well.
Among Marshall's many first-gen support initiatives is a first-generation directory for the many faculty and staff who were first-gen students to list their names.
That way, if a student's taking a chemistry class, they may see, oh my gosh, my chemistry professor, maybe he's not so scary to go talk to after all.
Dr. Mary Beth Beller is on that first-gen faculty list. The political science professor gets emotional, remembering her single mother working as an office secretary, acting upon her vow to ensure that her 3 daughters went to college.
I had to take out student loans because there was no money. And she paid every penny of those student loans herself on secretary's wages. She never, ever let us know that we had the option not to go to college. And so we grew up with that mindset.
Beller says today's Marshall first-gen students have something she somewhat lacked in school, a vast and varied support network.
It is absolutely amazing to me to learn about the wealth of opportunities that we have in terms of student services. Not just in tutoring, but in support services to help guide our students and show them the ropes.
Marshall first-gen junior Emma Johnson says both her parents went into blue-collar jobs right out of high school. She says she came in as a Marshall freshman, wide-eyed and an empty book.
I walked in as an empty book, and it was like, let's write the story. I came in and I was around so many people who seemed like they already have the next, 5 to 10 years planned out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I that couldn't be me. Like, I have no idea entirely what I want to do, where I want to end up in life.
Taking advantage of Marshall's support network, Johnson flourished academically and socially. She's now a leader of the campus's award-winning radio station. And she's bonded with 2 of her professors who also hail from her hometown of Logan, West Virginia.
So having their guidance and, they're always pushing me to be my best, and to know that they always tell me, no matter where you come from, no matter what you went through, like, you can still do this. And I think that has been a super big inspiration to me.
More than half of Marshall's student body is first gen. Dr. Beller says that stat is both shocking and pleasing.
I find that statistic shocking. I also think it's really good because, A, it means we're really good at recruiting and showing high school students and their parents that this is an opportunity that they can actually take advantage of.
Back at the Memorial Student Center, Jamie Wheeler has nothing but thanks and praise for her collegiate acclamation.
They have worked as hard as they possibly can to provide a happy and fulfilling experience for all of the first-gen students here.
A support system that's led by an inspiring Marshall staff member, also listed in the first-gen directory, School President Brad Smith. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Randy Yohe in Huntington.
West Virginia has the highest rates of smoking in the U.S. for adults and high school students. And lung cancer is the leading cause of the state's cancer-related deaths. Some states are using money from the 1998 tobacco settlement to help people quit smoking or prevent them from ever starting. West Virginia, though, invests less than 1% of its tobacco settlement money into these kinds of programs. Emily Rice has more.
West Virginia receives more than $232.6 million in tobacco revenue annually from tobacco settlement payments and taxes combined, but invests less than 1% of that total, about $450,000 in tobacco prevention and cessation programs. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, recommends that West Virginia spend $24.7 million annually to combat the health and economic consequences of tobacco use. The American Lung Association, or ALA, released its 7th annual State of Lung Cancer report in November for Lung Cancer Awareness Month. The 2024 report found West Virginia ranks 49th among all states in rates of new lung cancer cases, placing the state in the bottom tier of the report. Even that failing grade is an improvement for the state. Over the last 5 years, the rate of new cases of lung cancer in West Virginia improved by 12%, down from 88% in 2019. The report also found West Virginia ranks worst in the nation for adults smoking, with 21% of all adults currently smoking. The report highlights how the toll of lung cancer varies by state and examines key indicators like new cases, survival, early diagnosis, surgical treatment, lack of treatment, screening rates, and insurance coverage of comprehensive biomarker testing.
Biomarker testing, basically, for someone that has cancer, they would genetically test the tumor, and the outcome of that testing, the DNA of that tumor, would help the surgical team or the oncology team better determine how to best treat the cancer.
That's Elizabeth Hensel, the ALA's advocacy director for Pennsylvania and West Virginia, two states with very different health outcomes.
One of the big differences between Pennsylvania and West Virginia is the amount of money that the state invests in tobacco prevention and control. West Virginia spends some of the least amount of money in the country, and that's reflected in the fact that it is the lowest in the country for smoking.
In West Virginia, 76.5 out of 100,000 people were diagnosed with lung cancer in the last year. The state funds tobacco control efforts at only 7.4% of the level recommended by the CDC.
Have been really great programs in the past in West Virginia on a regional basis with people doing education and, boots on the ground. And that money was taken away about 5 years ago, I think. And that lack of education in a rural state it's detrimental to the health of the citizens.
Hensel emphasizes the importance of education and prevention before cessation to reduce smoking rates. Dr. Robert Herron is a general thoracic surgeon at West Virginia University's Wheeling Hospital. He agrees that education is vital to solving West Virginia's tobacco problem and slowing rates of lung cancer.
I think if you have to put in one word, it'd be education. So yeah, smoking's bad for you. It leads to lung cancer. And not only that, but peripheral vascular disease and other types of primary cancers, namely pancreatic, esophageal.
Herron says improvements to West Virginia's screening rates could quell the rise of lung cancer.
Between stages 1 and 2, you're talking about a 25-30% discrepancy in prognosis. For example, stage 1 lung cancers, you can tell a patient you have about an 80-85% chance of 5-year survival, which is cure, versus a stage 2 where you're dropping into the 30 and 40% range. So finding it early is the main thing, I think, if we're going to put a dent in improving this thing.
Only 13.5% of high-risk individuals in West Virginia are currently getting screened, which is much lower than the national average of 16%.
We should be at the same rates as people getting mammograms and colonoscopies and things like that. So it's just really important that people that are at high risk tell their doctors, I want to be screened, and then they can have that done.
Hensel says lung cancer cases in West Virginia are stable but remain high. She suggests that West Virginia should pass legislation to require insurance companies to cover biomarker testing for cancer patients.
It would really help the outcomes of people with cancer in West Virginia. So that's one thing. Pennsylvania did actually just pass that in our last legislative session. And another thing that's just really so important, and this goes back to, the education, is lung cancer screenings.
Lung cancer screenings involve a low-dose CT scan to detect early signs of the disease. Hensel says health insurance covers lung cancer screenings for high-risk individuals 50 years and older. The CDC defines a high-risk individual as someone with a medical condition or risk factor that increases their chance of severe illness or complications. Hensel encourages people at high risk to discuss screening with their doctors and emphasizes the need for increased awareness and funding.
If we can't increase the funding for education, if we can't get the biomarker testing covered by insurance in West Virginia, if nothing else, already out there is lung cancer screening.
The West Virginia Division of Tobacco Prevention operates a Tobacco Quit line where callers can get information, advice, support, and referrals for resources. The West Virginia Tobacco Quit line is 1-877-966-8784. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Emily Rice in Charleston.
Growing up, author Joy Calloway stayed at some of Appalachia's most famous resorts, like the Greenbank in West Virginia. Those family trips inspired some of her novels, including her latest, What the Mountains Remember. It takes readers to Asheville, North Carolina in 1913, when the Grove Park Inn was just being built. Producer Bill Lynch spoke with Calloway about writing and her new book.
Just because it's a moment I'd like to hear about. The first time you saw your book in a bookstore, on the shelves there, on display, what was that like?
It's hard to even describe. It seems almost surreal. And I think you work, so many hours and so many months and years sometimes on your book that you get the advance copies, in the mail. I almost feel like that was really when it seemed real to me, because I opened the box and you have these books and they look like books. In my early drafts of my books, I was printing them out at like Staples and going and, getting a 3-ring binder and, thinking about what the covers would look like. And it didn't look anything like a book. And then one of these days you open your front door and a box is sitting there and it has actual books in it. And there's a cover on it. It has your name. And going into Barnes and Noble and seeing it sitting there and then hearing people's reactions to it was a dream come true, because stories are meant to be shared,
You have written historical fiction. What's the attraction to diving into the past and finding stories there?
It stems from two places. When I was growing up, my parents read us classic novels, so classic literature. And even though, you wouldn't necessarily off the bat think, okay, well, Jane Austen, Bronte's, that they were historical fiction. They are historical fiction. They're classic writers, but it's historical fiction. I distinctly remember reading Little Women for the first time. I remember reading The Secret Garden for the first time. And it almost felt like you were time traveling, or that you were kind of dropping into a fantasy, because, we're never going to see those eras. We're never going to see those times. But it also made me really think about the state of the world today and just how much we've learned from the past, and how much we still have to learn, where we've been and kind of where we're going to go in the future. And every time, I would pick up a book to read when I was even in high school, I would pick up the classic novels. There's just something about the language and there was something about the history that I really was drawn to. And I credit that to my parents, because, again, I think whatever book you fell in love with first, you tend to kind of carry that on through your life at some point, whether you can put the genre down and pick it up again, years later, and you still probably enjoy that type of book. The second thing is I honestly credit my maternal grandma a lot for my writing historical fiction, because those stories she told me about my ancestors and my family fascinated me. Her parents both passed away pretty young. And so she would talk about her parents, but also people that came before her parents, in a very realistic and real way, to the point where I felt like that I knew them. And so I wanted to feel what they felt and step into their shoes a little bit. And I've written 2 books that are directly from my family history. So it's my debut novel, The Fifth Avenue Artist Society, and then my book that came out last year called All the Pretty Places. And those are directly from family history pretty much. I heard a quote once from a fellow author, and she was saying that people ask all the time, why do you write historical fiction? Why don't you just write nonfiction? Or why don't you just read something factually completely accurate? She said, the difference is when you read a piece of historical fiction, you read it to feel the way people felt in times past. And I think that's absolutely true. I think historical fiction gives us empathy. It helps us understand.
Let's talk a little about the new book, What the Mountains Remember.
Yes.
This also about a place, which was very similar to, I guess, the Grand Design, which has a hotel.
Yes.
Greenbrier. So talk about the new book.
The Grand Design obviously set at the Greenbrier, 100% set there. Wrote it because it's my happy place. Love going there. How can you not be happy with Dorothy Draper's designs? You walk in, you're met with color and cheer, and I had to uncover what that was like for Dorothy to redesign the hotel, which would become a masterpiece and still is. With this book, it follows the story of Belle Newbold, who is the stepdaughter of an oil and gas magnate from Indiana. And her real father was a miner from Boone County, West Virginia. When you meet Belle, she's about to embark on this illustrious camping trip with the Vagabonds, which was Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, Thomas Edison's camping expedition that they took yearly. And they would invite other industrialists and different types of thinkers, I guess, on their trips with them, just to kind of share camaraderie, but also explore new ideas and things like that. And they're going to Asheville to embark on, again, another exploratory adventure. But these camping trips were very much like glamping to the highest degree. These were not, lay your cot on the ground and rough it. They wanted to appear like the everyman, but they really brought this caravan of servants with them, and they would set up these tent cities, and it was very glamorous, actually. So Belle is going along on this camping trip And it's the first time she's seen mountains in 7 years since her father died in a mine collapse. And nobody really knows her backstory. No one knows quite where she's from, because when she was younger, she had actually seen a situation where a wealthy coal mine owner had disowned his wife for coming from an impoverished background. But when she sees the mountains again, she's forced to confront some, hardships that she's gone through. As they embark on this journey, Henry Ford was notorious for taking field trips with the vagabonds. But one of the things they did when they were in Asheville is they go to see the unfinished Grove Park Inn, which the locals are calling the eighth wonder of the world. I don't know if you've seen it, Bill, but it's basically like a stack of stones. The Grove Park is stones stacked on top of each other in the craziest ways. So they go visit the unfinished Grove Park Inn. And while they're touring it, she stumbles into having to write a story about the workers building the inn. But as she starts to get to know these workers, they're extremely skilled laborers. They come from all different places in the country, and they're magnificently, skilled at what they do. She starts to see that they're hiding a secret. And if that secret gets out, it threatens to uncover her secret. As all of my books are, it's a true love story to a place I love and like to go a lot. And I remember going to the Grove Park for the first time and thinking how I was a little kid, but thinking, how in the world is this thing standing? It looked like a Jenga puzzle. And, of course, to an adult, there's cement and all that stuff. But to me, I was like, whoa, we're staying in, it's a house made of little stones. And what if it just tips over? I just didn't know. But it seemed so amazing that I knew that eventually I'd write a story set there.
In your opinion, what makes for a great or a grand hotel? What makes the experience so much?
There's so many hotels nowadays that are considered luxurious and wonderful and maybe in a pretty location, but they don't have the character and they don't have the history. And I think for me, I'm drawn to places that when you walk into it, you kind of feel the people that have walked those halls before you. So anytime I can go to a place that makes me feel like that, I think there's stories here, and that's what makes a place special.
That was author Joy Calloway speaking with Bill Lynch. Her new novel is What the Mountains Remember. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Eric Vincent Huey, Charlie McCoy, Javon Jackson and Nikki Giovanni, John Ingram, Dinosaur Burps, June Carter Cash, and Larry Rader. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Clara Hazlett. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.